हरि ओम। ओम सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः। योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पातञ्जलि प्राञ्जलिना नतोऽस्मि। हरि ओम। According to commentators, Bhashyakara of Yoga Shastra, one of the most important sutra in Sadhana Pada is the sutra that we are studying, the 13th sutra, Sati Mule Tadvipako Jati Ayuhu Bhogaha. We see in this world millions and billions of lives are throbbing with life. Each one is leading his own life, and each one has his own reason for living. If you take an example of the richest person on earth as of date, or the Nobel laureate as of date, and ask him a very fundamental question: why do you live? Also ask the same question to yourself: why do I live? What is the purpose of my life? It's quite an eluding question. Two reasons. One, we have never stopped and asked this question to ourselves. On a larger scale, it looks like everyone is running in a race. Because somebody ran, others are following and running. No one knows the destination. And forget about the destination, no one knows the reason why we are running. You might say that, well, I have a family, I am a married man, I have children, I have a job, I have a world to cater to, I have to earn something, I have to stay at one place. These are eventual happenings. These are not the purposes of life. If you jump into a pool of water, your body is bound to get wet by the water. That is an essential outcome of very reason being jumping into the water. We are considering effects as the cause. We are considering effects as the goals of our life. Why are we leading the life that we are leading? One, you must know the reason why we are leading that life. And second, is it a right reason to lead the life? I get up in the morning, do my daily chores, have my breakfast, then go to the office. Then I look at my children, say hello to them. Then look at my wife, say hello to her. She goes on with her work. I go on with my work. We come back home again, have dinner together. Maybe a friend drops in. Then we switch on the TV, try to find out what is happening in the nook and corner in terms of happenings, and then we sleep off. Is this the purpose of life? One, then if it is not the purpose of life, why this life is happening in this particular manner? For every mistake, there has to be two explanations. One, what is the mistake? And two, what is the right thing? They're two sides of the same coin. So the purpose of my life is presently influenced by what is called as transactional world or Vyavaharika Vishwa. Why do I want to have an Aston Martin car for myself? Because some people came together and decided that is the best car available. So what am I doing? I'm blindly following the standards set by a community or a common thinking of people who by themselves do not know the purpose of life. If you look carefully and analyze your life, one would realize that it is nothing else but blind imitation of things that are happening around. I wear a fancy dress because there are people who have fancied that idea. I simply blindly imitated it. A little larger palatial house is a thing to aspire for. Why? Because some people have set the parameter that you must emulate that and it will lead to happiness. This brings us to a very fundamental question. The sukham that we are trying to get and the dukkham that we are trying to avoid must be analyzed threadbare. The focus has to be on the analysis of sukham and dukkham in life, and that is the only thing that can take us to the core or the fundamental problem. My life is full of sukham and dukkham. I aspire for something, I detest or hate something. I want certain things, I do not want certain things. I am attracted, attached to things that I want to have. This longing to have is called ragam in Sanskrit. A common misunderstanding about the word ragam is anger. It is not anger. Rag is considered as anger. No, it is not anger. Rag is sukhanushai ragaha. The bond, the bondage, the attachment that one develops for the sake of sukham is called raga. And the opposite of that is the hatred or the animosity or the avoidance that one develops for avoiding certain things is called dvesham. A very close look at our life, we will realize we have only two things in our life, ragam and dvesham. That's it. There is nothing other than that we have in our life. You like something, you dislike something. What you like, you want to perpetuate, keep on doing. What you do not like, you want to avoid, brush aside. And a constant endeavor, a constant effort to have that what you like and to move away what you don't like is what is called as life. If we are agreeing to this fact, then comes the question, is this the purpose of life? Striving to have something which you like and striving to push away something which you dislike? Is this the purpose of the life? That is why Patanjali Yoga Sutra in Sadhana Pada takes this question head on. The whole purpose of Yoga Sutra in Sadhana Pad in the first 15 shlokas or sutras is to emphasize upon our intellect that the very reason of we lying into the trap of life itself is a trap. And the very reason of lying in this trap, getting stuck in this trap, is the misunderstanding, misapprehension, or avidya. A simpler definition of avidya is considering what is not as what is. We are firmly convinced, we have a firm conviction in our mind that life is truth, world is true, birth is true, death is true. And Maharaj, none of this is true. These are all aberrations. These are all abnormalities. If birth is an abnormality, death is an abnormality, between 2 points, the life itself is an abnormality. Then what is normalcy? And normalcy is not to be born, not to be dead, and not to be alive the way we are alive. And why do we say so? We say so because we are birthless, we are deathless, and we are ever alive. None of these three statements are experienced by us, so we don't believe in it. Being birthless, we haven't seen, experienced, heard of it. Being deathless, never heard of it. And alive forever, never even thought of it. All these three together is Atmadarshanam, which is a theoretical goalpost of life, presently theoretical. So, the present life that we are leading is a life which is a mistaken identity. So, the first job that we must undertake as sadhaka is to bow with reverence to Patanjali Maharaj and study the Yoga Sutra to understand how this life can be false. Then to understand what is the real life. And while understanding the false life, if you call my life as false, apparent, and non-existing, then explain me. Because right now I'm talking. You can't tell me that, no, you can't, you're not, there's no need to talk. I'm vibrant with life. You can't tell me that I'm lifeless. I'm interacting with people who are listening. You can't tell me that this world is an illusion. Explain me, convince me. And to convince that, in order to understand why this life, why this world is nothing else but an apparent effect of something called avidya, which works through the medium of karma. So the plethora or the combination, the humongous combination of the whole presence, the gamut of presence on this planet is nothing else but originating from a seed called avidya, manifesting in the form of karma. Now the dissection has started. The dissection is, first of all, let us see what the body is composed of. When we do the anatomical study in dissection of the body in medical college, we try to dissect the body to know, let us see what it is made up of. Now we are dissecting life. Our life is being dissected. And when the life is dissected, it is found that it is full of one substance called karma. If it is full of one substance called karma, then we must know that whatever originates karma originates the body, originates the life, originates the world, originates the interaction with the world. That means if we know the reason for the karma, we will know the origin from where the whole world is emanating. And precisely for that reason, the 13th sutra assumes enormous significance. Sati Mule. Sati Mule. The origin itself, Mulaha, what is the origin? Kleshaha. Karma is a flower blossoming on the tree called Klesha. Klesha is a tree flourishing from the, or emanating, sprouting from the seed called avidya. Avidya is the seed, klesha is the tree, karma is the blossoming or the flower. If this is the case, then the focus has to be on klesha. You cut the tree, flowers will die. What we are doing? We are trying to deal with the flowers. Sir, if you deal with one flower, one petal, there are many flowers and new flowers are coming. How long you will work on the karma? You have to work on the tree. Then what about, why not to work on the seed itself? The seed has already sprouted. Then once you cut the tree, the roots will automatically die, desiccate and die. Avidya will be definitely annihilated, provided you cut off the tree. By cutting branches, you come down to the stem and then you uproot the tree. The process of doing this is Yoga Shastra, the Raja Yoga. So this sutra brings us to a very important point, that Klesha is the mother of karma. There is definitely repetition of certain things what we have spoken in the earlier classes, and it is being done deliberately because it is a very critical part of Yoga Sutra. and mind well. Yoga Sutra being written by maybe Panchashikhacharya or Patanjali Maharaj himself said somebody already wrote it earlier, whatever it may be, theirs is done. They are already liberated soul. Whole study why we are doing it is, how can I do my sadhana? And you get the clue for the sadhana. The most important practical advice comes from Yoga Sutra. That is why we are discussing this, sometimes taking the chance of repetition. Klesha, there are five, we have seen them. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha, these are the five kleshas. Of that, three we are not aware. Avidya, we are completely unaware. In fact, we don't have even the faintest idea what avidya is. Asmita, we are so embedded in it that we cannot segregate or separate it. The ahankara, the me, mine, is so ingrained in me that I'm not able to segregate it. I cannot even think of my life without me into it. So deeply ingrained this is in me. Abhinivesha, the fear of death, I am never aware that I am going to die. Even now, when we say that one day I am going to die, even now it feels like it's a theoretical proposition. Why? I'm not going to die. Bhuyasam, I shall always be there. It is so ingrained in us that we are not at all scared of death. Even when we go to the funeral of somebody, we say, oh, one day everybody has to go. While saying itself, we know inside that I'm not going to go. So avidya, asmita, abhinivesh are already out of our radar, mental radar. Only sukham and dukkham is something which is constantly in our radar, because either we are happy or unhappy. We are either basking in so-called sukham or we are basking in dukkham. Constantly, like a car going into the traffic, we are avoiding dukkham and trying to have sukham. Now the question is, let us take an example where there is a day in our life where lots of things happened in the day, but it neither created sukham nor created dukkham. Can you imagine this life? Let us take example. Early morning, I got up and went for a walk. That is how perhaps our day might be starting. When we go out for the walk, what is the first thing we do? Ah, what a beautiful morning. What happened, sir? Happiness prevailed. Sukham prevailed. You didn't go out and just be there. Without complete neutrality of the mind, you've gone out for the walk. Doesn't happen. Then you start walking and you say, oh, so many people are there in the morning for the walk, but not all of them are really taking care of their health. What happened, sir? You are again into an arena where either you are despising somebody or liking. So liking and disliking, sukham and dukkham, anukula and pratikula, is constantly accompanying us. Our foolish imagination is, when I am not expressing my liking and disliking with intensity, I feel it is absent, but it is not. I was playing with my child and I felt very happy. What's wrong in it? It is wrong, sir. Why it is wrong? You created a sukham. What is wrong in creating sukham, sir? That is what life is all about. What is all good things? What has happened is, by sukham also you created a klesha. Klesha. And moment you create a klesha, klesha leads to karma. And karma will lead to karma ashaya. If you can remember any incidents in life where you were not subjected to sukham and dukkham, that is the incidence, that is the moment when no karma was produced. A deep sleep. Sukham is absent, dukkham is absent. And I'm talking about dreamless sleep. Sukham is absent, dukkham is absent, asmita is absent because you're not even aware of your body. Abhinivesh because you're not thinking. So death is of no consequence. Avidya is still there. Only one klesha is there. All other four kleshas are gone. So sleep is a desirable condition. But when you are awake, how can you sleep? That means you will have to inculcate a technique of sleeping while being awake. Sleeping while being awake. Ya nisha sarva bhutani yasmat jagrati sanyami. Now you understand the Bhagavad Gita shlok far better. When others are sleeping, he is awake. When others are awake, yogi is sleeping. Sleeping means klesha rahita. So klesha rahitata is the aim. When nothing is bothering my mind and not creating any reaction or response in the mind, then what will happen? There is no karma. If there is no karma, the whole trail is over. But that is an ideal goalpost. How to reach that goalpost? What happens during that particular journey? We already saw in Samadhi Pada. How yogis start slowly graduating upwards to the point where all the kleshas are removed and annihilated ab initio. Nothing remains of the kleshas. But that's a goalpost. Let's come down to our level. Our level is full of kleshas. Now, how does this work? The mechanism of working of klesha and karma is critical for understanding to us so that with complete clarity, we can do sadhana. For any journey, you require a map. The 13th sutra is the map for sadhana. In the darkness, you are trying to find out a door to escape, and you are palpating everywhere. You are knocking on the wall to see where the door is. And then when you know the door, then you want to see the handle. Just turn the handle of the door and then you'll be out of the darkness. This knocking when it comes to the door is this 13th sutra. And what does it state? Sati Mule, the root of all karmas is klesha. Now we all know we succumb to all 5 kleshas. Raga, Dvesha, obviously known to me. Other 3 unknown yet operating inside my chitta or antakarana. So what happens next? Every time I am happy or unhappy, I create a karma. What you do, whether you are eating Srikhandam, whether you are fighting with somebody, whether you are sitting relaxed, having a glass of whiskey, all that is immaterial. Those are paraphernalia. Those are not important. Important is the net effect. Net effect on the mind. Is sukham or dukkham? Yes, sir. I'm feeling very good. It's evening time. The cricket match is going on. I have a nice glass of beer in my hand. Sukham, sir, it is klesham. How dare you say this is a klesham because I'm enjoying? We're going to come to that. This so-called enjoyment pinches a yogi. A yogi is extremely uncomfortable with sukham also. In the same manner, we are all uncomfortable with dukkham. On dukkham, we don't want it. Yogi also doesn't want it. But on Sukham, we differ. On Sukham, we want it. Yogi says, I don't want Sukham also. We have to study why. How can Sukham be bad? All effort I'm doing for Sukham. A nice 65-inch TV, how can it be Dukkham? A nice wife who doesn't speak and retort back and listens to everything what the husband says, even though the husband may be doing any kind of stupidity. And yet, suppose it happens, it is Sukham? No. How about the children most obedient coming and touching your feet and then taking the water by dipping your great toe into the water and drinking it every morning? Such obedient children is Sukham? No. Why? Two things we need to study. One, how the karma is produced and what happens to these karmas. Second, how Sukham can be a klesha. Very fundamental to us. Because if you don't understand that Sukham is a klesha, we will not leave what we are doing. Every time a Ferrari passes by, we will not stop desiring it. See, Vairagyam, 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 we have studied it so many times and only at a superficial level. Maybe, I wear this cotton thing, I feel I'm Vairagyi now because I'm not wearing any silk in my... This is not Vairagyam. I'm very simple, I just stay on fruits. I don't really fancy, I don't go out, I'm not on WhatsApp, I'm Vairagyi. No, that is not the concept of Vairagya. Yes, an inch forward you might have gone, but kilometers are to be passed. So to know Vairagyam, what is important to know is how the Sukham also affects us and how the karma works. The first thing Patanjali Maharaj tells us is that Klesha is the mother of karma. Normally we feel karma produces Klesha. Karma doesn't produce anything. I was thirsty, I was given a water. So a karma happened, no problem. When you drink water, what karma happens? Nothing. Moment you say, such a chilled water, if I can get every time when I'm thirsty, sir, karma happened to klesha. The kleshas came out. So come. You work very hard for a month and you get about 10,000 dirhams in your pocket. Nothing big. A karma happened, result happened. I should have got 20, but they gave me only 10,000. Klesha happened, and now the karma has happened. The act, performance, interaction will be converted to or graduated to karma level only if klesha is present. Absence of klesha cannot lead to karma. Fundamental thing. Sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilapa rahita sa titiksha nigadyate in Vivek Chudamani. Why this is said titiksha? Sahan karo, tolerate, don't react. Why don't react? React means karma. People ridicule these days Mahatma Gandhiji as saying that, he never reacted to anything. Sir, no, he was a jnani. A jnani doesn't react. Responding is a different thing, but response also has to come for the sake of response by the body or the senses as required in the transaction without creating kleshas in the mind. Bhagavan Sri Krishna was advising Arjuna to go ahead full blast in the war. But when he was telling him to go on the war, he had no liking or disliking about anybody in the Kaurava. He didn't like them, but he didn't dislike them also. Bhagavan was klesha rahita. Arjuna was a klesha sahita. Vishad. Vishad is klesh, dukkham. He wanted to avoid. Avoidance is dvesha. Klesha, Vishad. That's why Lord was hell-bent on telling him, separate the kleshas from the karma you are doing. Karma, when it is bound with klesha, it becomes a karma. Otherwise, it is just a plain mundane activity happening as per the cosmic rules. Put the seed and the flowering plant will start sprouting. There is no klesha there. It is cosmic law. The clouds will come and it will rain. Rain doesn't come for making you happy or unhappy. Tree doesn't give you shelter to make you happy or unhappy or to make himself happy or unhappy. It is called an act, not a karma. The graduation to karma is possible when the happenings get the tint of klesha into it. So what is the fundamental rule for us? Whatever may happen, no kleshas. It is right to say in case of dukkham, but in case of sukham, it is very difficult. In dukkham, anyway, you want to avoid something painful. Some hot thing is pricking or causing pain to your arm. You will somehow take your hand behind and say that, okay, I should not curse anybody. I should not curse anybody. You will do repentance in front of Vithala. That is different thing. But when the boss is telling you that if you do this, I shall be rewarding you with this, and then the amount of happiness that starts coming inside, that sukham is something where it is difficult to remember that it is a klesha. To equate sukham to klesha is very difficult. So an activity is getting upgraded to karma through klesha is easier to remember when you are suffering from untoward incidences. But for happiness, it is difficult. That is the reason why the great sage Kabir Maharaj says, दुख में सुमिरन सब करे, सुख में करे न कोई. सुख में सुमिरन करे तो दुख काहे को होए. In the happiness, you have to remember that this is also a klesha. How and why is the 16th mantra, 14th, 15th, 14th and 15th deals with that sutra. There's something called parinama dukkha, tapa dukkha, and samskara dukkha. These three dukkhas are associated with happiness. We will come to that. We are all studying this in detail, not to boast knowledge, not to tell people, look, Patanjali Maharaj. It is for us, for me, as an ardent sadhaka, to think and act. Because this sukham and dukkham, kleshams, are constantly bubbling out of our antakarana, a constant mantra in Sanskrit in all scriptures is Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let there be peace. What is peace? Klesha rahitya is peace. That is the moment to be lived. If the life can be lived without kleshas, it itself means with shanti. Humongous activity Gurudeva did, Jnana Yajna. A very difficult activity and on a grand scale he did. Vivekananda went everywhere, America, lectures, explanations, everything he did. Was it a karma? No, sir. Then what? Because it did not create any kleshas. In the wintry morning with a snowfall all around and the body shivering with the cold, in a cargo yard, Vivekananda was shivering whole night before becoming a great speaker in the Parliament of Religious Conference. At that time also, no dukkham. And when for almost 3 to 5 minutes, people were clapping at their loudest and cheering, the most prolific speech ever given by a monk. A person like you and me would have gone up and up in the feeling that how nice. There also, in the night, he wept. He wept because he said to Mahamaya, Mahamaya, if you give me so much of accolades and so much of adoration with all the masses, what will happen to me? Because he knew the Sukham can also be equally dangerous, or rather more dangerous than the Dukkham. So each karma that we do, if it is associated with klesha, then klesha puts that karma into a pool of thing called karma ashaya. Let us take an example. I shouted at somebody. When I shout at somebody, at that shout itself, because I have shouted, why did I shout? I was angry. Why was I angry? Because something happened which I didn't want to happen. That means there was a dvesha. Because of the dvesha, what happened? A klesha got created. So shouting resulted into a klesha. That means now a karma is formed. Shouting is over, but the echo, pratidhvani, the echo, it's still there in the form of karma. And where does this karma go? It goes and stays in a pool. One more stone is dropped into a pot. One karma. Size of the stone depends upon the size of the karma. I went and murdered somebody. A huge stone of karma will be dropped into the container. I shouted at somebody, a little smaller size stone will be. I did not feel good about what he said. I did not say anything to him, but in the heart, I felt I didn't like him. A little still smaller pebble will be dropped into the container. This pot where we are dropping our karmas in the form of a pebble or a stone or a boulder will continue to feel. This pot is called karma ashaya. How much is the size of the pot of karma ashaya? The length of your life. From birth till death, whatever you do shall be thrown into one pot, which is called one karma ashaya. How many pots are there? Many pots are there. Millions of pots are there. That pot lying in the corner, can you see far off there? That was my 1300th year before the birth. That pot was there. What is it waiting for? It is waiting for the next birth. So karma shayas are nothing else but the pots filled with the karmas and stored in unknown place. The hard disk is huge. No limit, no terabytes. It will keep on filling. Expenditure is very less, one birth at a time. Then the question came to the mind, if I do one karma, the one karma will give me one birth, or all the karmas made in the one life will give me one birth, or multiple karmas will give multiple births, or multiple karmas will give me one birth. This is also discussed in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Vijnana Bhikshu, Vachaspati Mishra, Raja Martanda Vritti of Raja Bhoj, as well as Vyas Maharaj. They have discussed all this in detail and they have concluded that one karma cannot give to one birth. Otherwise, in one life itself, there are so many karmas, then there will be a problem of sequence. Which karma is giving which birth and which karma is still left is so difficult, because in one life itself, billion karmas are made. And out of that billion, if one is going to give one birth, that is logically impossible. So one karma doesn't give one birth. What about one karma giving multiple births? That is also not possible, because if one karma gives one birth, still the sequence will be so huge. And if one karma gives multiple births, then to logically it will be absolutely in a chaotic condition. So that is not possible. What about multiple karmas of multiple births giving only one birth? That is also not possible, because then it will be difficult to know this fructification of karma is of which birth. Birth number 1, 2, 3, 4, 17, 18, 19. Very difficult to calculate and account for. So the most logical conclusion agreed upon and realized by the sages is, and as stated by the yogi of highest stature, Panchashikhacharya, the follower of Patanjali, that one birth, whatever karmas are done, they are all collected into one thing, one pot called karmashaya. One karmashaya gives rise to one birth. This is the accepted norm. The karmas done during a lifetime are collected at one place, waiting for rebirth so that they can be exhausted. When shall that be exhausted? That depends on the niyati, destiny, the way cosmic law goes. That is why in the Bhashyam, the analogy taken about the karmashayas is of the fisherman's net. In a fisherman's net, there are many knots, and then there are threads. The rope, the threads are there, and knots are there. The knots are the karmashayas. Huge net. Knots represent the karmashayas, the pots. What about the threads? The threads are called vasana. We are now getting into the details of karma. So far, we have been always considering vasana as same, desire, the karma as same. No. Vasana is different than karma. Why so? Karmashaya, or the pot of the karma, which is responsible for the one birth, because it gives rise to one birth, it is called Eka Bhavika. Eka Bhavika means the one that gives rise to one birth. So one karmashaya is Eka Bhavika. Every karmashaya, or the pot of karma, gives rise to one birth, so it is Eka Bhavika. And this karma is dissipated or spent in three forms: jati, ayu, and bhoga. Species, lifespan, and the bhogas. These three are the manners in which you will lead the life. How long you will live? You will be born as what? And whether you'll be having sukha bhoga or dukkha bhoga, that is all pre-decided by which karma you are exhausting, which karma shaya you are exhausting. So every karma shaya gives rise to one birth, eka bhavika, and it is also three vipakatmaka. Three vipaka means giving rise to three dissipations in the form of three things: jati, ayu, and bhoga. So karma shaya is three vipakatmaka, eka bhavitmaka. Eka bhavika, three vipakatmaka is one karmashaya. Then what is the difference between karmashaya and or karma and vasana? Vasana is aneka bhava purvika. Let me explain this. It is important for us to know in detail, because our sadhana is going to depend on it. Aneka bhava purvika means what? Aneka bhava means many, multiple births. Bhava means to be born. Aneka bhava purvika, that means prior to multiple births. Karmashaya is ekabhavika. Karmashaya is something which gives rise to one birth. Vasana is not bhavika. Vasana does not give rise to birth. Loosely we have been reading like this. It is even said like that. Now we are into precision. The reason is Karmashaya is a Janaka Sanskara. Janaka means father. Karmashaya is Janaka Sanskara means it gives birth. He's a father. So gives birth to life, one life. So Karmashaya is Janaka Sanskar. Vasana is Janya Sanskar. Janya means produced. Now, what is the difference? It may sound little confusing, but let's clarify it. Every time you experience anything good or bad, it creates a memory, smruti. Now, is memory tangible? No. Birth is tangible. Jati, Ayu, Bhog are tangible. We see it. I'm born, I'm suffering. These are tangible, anubhavatmak. Smruti is existing there. I had a good experience when I was riding in Ferrari. Now the question is, Ferrari is tangible, riding is tangible, experience that came in the form of and remained as smruti, memory, is not tangible, but it is there. It can be recalled back. Because out of the entire karma, the gist that came, the final thread that came was in the form of memory. So vasanas are smruti utpadaka. Smruti utpadaka. Why do we crave for happiness? Because of our smruti. Because of the previous experience that the Srikhandam was good, I want to have it again. The strong attraction for the sexual feeling is because of the experience that Ajanma, suppose there is an Ashtik Brahmachari, Bala Brahmachari, he doesn't have the experience about the woman or the man. But the one who has experienced it once, the memory remains alive. Stronger the experience, stronger the memory, stronger the vasana. That is why vasanas are a smruti utpadak and they are anadikalik. When we felt first time happy about first thing, we don't know. Many anadikal. That's why in Samadhipada we saw the yogi, when he tries to go into Nirbija Samadhi, he tries to extract and throw away the vasanas. When the vasanas are done, they are comparable to the threads of a fisherman's net. The knots are karmashayas. When the threads are gone, knots will automatically go. That means karmashaya is eka bhavika. Vasanas are not eka bhavika. That means vasanas do not give birth to one life. They are not an eka bhava purvika. They are not present before one birth. They are not responsible for multiple births. They are not aneka bhavika. They are in the form of smruti. It is the karma that gives rise to birth. Klesha produces karma. Karma creates karmashaya. Karmashaya is responsible for the new birth. And vasanas are aneka bhava purvika, meaning the future births that are going to come, vasana stands much before that, not directly responsible for the birth, but responsible for creating smruti. The concept of Adam eat the apple lies here. He ate the apple and liked the first smruti. Then everything, then karmashaya, then repetitive, then vicious cycle, all that started. That is why Klesha creates karma. Karma drops into a container, becomes karmashaya. Karmashaya gives rise to the new birth. And the one which is right now going on is called Drushta Janma Vedaniya Karmashaya. That means current Karmashaya. Right now we are living in current Karmashaya. What about my other Karmashaya? They are still pending, sir. They will be coming later on. I will be born. But where I will be born, depending upon which pot is going to fructify. If the pot number 14 is taken by God and given for the next birth, and in pot number 14, the jati was Sarpa, I will become a snake. How long I will live? It is written on the pot. 3 years. The snake will live for 3 years. And what are the bhogas? The bhogas will be that I will be into that particular furrow, I will burrow, I will be there, and then I'll have a fight with a mongoose, and then whatever bhogas are written. How much pain, how much happiness will be given, that is written. How long you will live, that is written. And which species you will be born, or in which atmosphere you will be, is written. That is called paristhiti. Currently, it was written in our Karmashaya pot that this man's address will be Dubai. We are in Dubai. Suddenly we hear that, oh, he was just 42 and died of an heart attack, because 42 was written on the pot. In those 42 years, but he was a very happy person. Sukha Bhoga was written on it. He suffered miserably, in the childhood he lost his father, and then he was going to the college. That time also he could not pay the fees, and his employer used to beat him, etc. All this happened because his bhogas were of dukkhatmak for this particular pot. And mind well, in the karmashaya is getting exhausted through a birth. It need not mean that you may not be having things around you. What things you will have has nothing to do with bhoga. We have a wrong conception. A person born to a very rich person, now he must be happy. It is never so. Being born in the rich family is a part of the karma vipaka, but bhoga is more important. So he may be born into a rich family, yet he is suffering from depression, dukkham. Whether you will get sukham, that's why a very poor fellow staying on a footpath, but he's very happy compared to a billionaire. Why? Because even though he's on a footpath, appliances may not be there, instruments may not be there, condition may not be conducive, but bhoga is sukha. So what is important is bhoga, sukham or dukkham. Where you lie in material. That reminds me, Gurudeva, when he was going, he went on foot from, with the ajna of his guru, he went towards Mathura Vrindavan. And while walking, imagine the heat of northern India, Gurudev was walking. Almost while reaching Delhi, he had a stroke. Somehow recovered from it. Then went back. While going back to Gurudeva's, his own Guru's ashram, Uttarkashi, because it took some days on foot, almost 100 and 200 miles. And then he was hungry, so he just was resting against a stone boulder and felt very happy. Now, when you're walking, you have not had food, how can you be happy? Because bhogam was of sukham. What is available, not available is not important. When the bhiksha is not given to a yogi, he says, maybe the God wants me to remain hungry. He is not unhappy. However, a rich person in whose house lots and lots of food is there, he is unhappy because he says, प्यार से खिलाने वाला कोई नहीं है. Nobody is there who can give me food with love and affection. So bhogam of sukham and dukkham is written, not the instruments. That is the reason why appliances, instruments around you does not guarantee you the bhoga, because bhoga depends on the karmashaya. That is why Tukaram Maharaj says, Jaishi sthiti ahe, taisha pari rahe. Be in the same state what God has given you. Kautuk tu pahe sanchitache. Just keep looking at the destiny, how she plays with you, and that too with surprise on your face, without malice in the mind or happiness of any kind. I was going out, suddenly some car came, struck me, got a fracture. Haricha, Hari Om. Suddenly I went out, somebody came and said, sir, you've been so kind to me, please take this $1,000. Haricha, Hari Om. Sukhe santosha na yave, dukhe vishada na bhajave. Jnaneshwar Maharaj says, don't get inflated by the happiness, don't get deflated by the sorrow. Sthita prajna lakshanam. That is because if you're not sthita prajna, klesh will come. Klesh comes, karma will come. Karma comes, karmasha will form. Karmasha will form, birth will happen. Birth will happen, samskar, the vasanas, smriti will become hardened. Vasanas will become hardened. Vasanas are aneka bhava purvika. That means having the potentiality to create multiple umpteen births forever and forever and forever. After understanding this sutra, then comes the fundamental question. Understood, sir, I was putting my feet on a burning coal, so it was painful and I don't want to do it. Agreed. But when I was sitting on a sofa, when my wife was massaging my legs, my one son was giving me grapes to eat, I was watching my favorite serial on the television. What is wrong in it? Why this should be also considered as a klesha? How sukham can be a klesha? Dukkham I understand, but sukham, I'm trying all my level best to get sukham and you call it as a klesha? Such a fine vacation I had in California. And here also you are turning your eyes away, saying that no, that is bad. I don't agree with it. Then becomes logical on our part to study. And that is why the 14th mantra and the 15th mantra is entirely dedicated to explain us how sukham itself is equally bad as dukkham. That we need to study a little bit more, because then only we will create a mental attitude towards our kleshas, so that we will avoid both. That will explain us why sthita prajnata is important. So that is why sati mule, klesha is the root of everything that we normally suffer from. Sati mule tad vipako jati ayuhu bhogaha. This is the meaning of the 13th sutra. This is the meaning of how karma operates. Now our choice, now our option is to study sukham and why it is bad, why it is a klesh. Once we study that, then hopefully we understand what are we supposed to do in our life is to reduce the kleshas as much as you can. And then comes the question. For the first time we'll be asking a sincere question to Patanjali Maharaj. Maharaj, I understood sukham and dukkham both are bad. Can you tell me how can reduce the kleshas? Then Patanjali Maharaj is going to start with Ashtanga Yoga. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. You have a question? Before Muditji, okay, Muditji is on. Okay, Muditji, over to you.
Okay, go on. I'll ask later.
Okay, Sanjay, very clear on karma. One thing that I just wanted to make sure I've understood right is karma. It is just that karma with phalam becomes karmashay, right? So karma will not, you in one place you said it is not karma but an act. If it is without, right? But karma remains karma. If you are doing it, if it leads with kalesha, then it leads to the fruit. But karma could be with or without. In a sense, karma does not change. That's incorrect, right?
No. Let's put it very clearly. What we perform is a performance or an act.
What is the meaning of that?
What it means is that supposing that I had a itch and I scratched. What is this? This is an act. There was an itch, so I just scratched. It is an act. Is this a karma? Not yet. If this one is associated with klesha, what the hell is itching here? What happened? Anger came because of the dvesha. I wanted to avoid this. Avoidance led to anger. Anger is nothing else, dvesha. Now it became act with klesha. Now it is a karma. An act plus klesha is equal to karma. Now this karma, whatever I said with little vengeance, with anger, now it has formed one karma and that went back and it stayed into a pot. The collection of such karmas is called karmashaya. Ashaya means collection. Each karma getting added to that pot. So this one karma of scratching with anger created one karma and went into the pot called karmashaya. After that, I again shouted at somebody. Second karma happened because shouting was with again dvesha. It went into the pot, became second constituent of the karmashaya. After that, I ate something and I said, it is so nice. I wish I could get it, again and again. I would love to have it. What happened? Sukhanushaya, another sukham. Sukhanushaya means sukha is klesha. Now one more karma went. Where? Into the karmashaya. Karma number 3. Now you will understand one after the other, the karmas are getting produced. Supposing you yawned, no karma. Why? You have no reaction to that. You just yawned. Yawning, you don't give any reaction. You sneezed. No reaction. So it's not a karma. Why? There's no klesha associated with it. But suppose you sneezed on somebody's face deliberately. What happened, sir? You hated that man. Dvesha. This now sneezing has gone into karma. Now what is karma phalam? Phalam has nothing to do with this. Phalam is a karma when it is done. A phalam is something which is attached to it. A karma is nothing else but it is pregnant with phalam. When we say karma goes and lands into that pot, it goes without saying that karma is anyway pregnant with phalam. Whenever the ripe opportunity comes, when it ripes, an opportunity comes, it will deliver the phalam. That is why it is called karma. Karma is something that holds within it deliverance. That deliverance is phalam. So act or performance plus the klesha equal to karma getting added to karmashaya. Karmashaya means multiple karmas pregnant with fruits for delivery, all coming out in one birth, eka bhava, and delivering the karmas. While delivering the past load, we create new karmas, again karmashayas. So one pot is exhausted, another pot is filled. One pot is exhausted. Bhala hua meri gagari phuti, main paniya bharan se chuti. Now you understand what Kabir Maharaj is saying? My pot is broken. Bhala hua meri gagari tuti, main paniya bharan se chuti. Now I don't have to go to fetch the water. I fetch the water, again I fetch the water. So karmashaya after karmashaya after karmashaya. How many karmashayas? Millions of them, bound together by threads called vasanas. Vasanas per se do not give rise to birth. To give rise to birth, it is karmashaya. But karmashayas are strengthened or kept in their place. The pots are connected with each other by threads called vasanas. Vasanas are spruti rupa, in the form of memories. Hari Om.
Sanjay ji, I have a question.
Yes,
Do you have a definition of klesha and karmashaya?
yes.
Can we get?
Pardon?
Can I get the
Yeah.
definition of klesha and karmashaya?
Klesha is the reaction to a performance or an act. And karmashaya is after the reaction or the response or the is given to a performance or an act, the resultant product is karma. And that karma, when it gets stored, it is called karmashaya. So when a performance gives rise to reaction or response, it is klesha. If klesha is not there, if response is not there, if reaction is not there, karma cannot happen. That being the reason, most of the saintly people, including Jesus Christ, even they were crucifying his hands, he did not create karma at all. He said, pardon them, they do not know. They are also nice people. They're doing it out of ignorance. Avidya hai. That's why they are doing it. It appears very theoretical to us. Only those who have reached that state. In fact, in spite of all these kleshas, all these people suffering from kleshas, even when an act of bad thing is happening to a saintly body, he is still talking of welfare of the people. So klesha is nothing else but a reaction to a performance or an act. Performance or an act plus klesha is equal to karma. And this karma is one single entity. Such single entities, when pulled or collected together, they're called karmashaya. Total karmas done in one birth are all collected in one place called karmashaya. Some multiple karmashayas are there of each birth. And those karmashayas, when they ripen for deliverance of fruit, new birth is taken. Which karmashaya will ripen? Which one will not ripen? Whether it is 1183 when I was born, that karmashaya will be born in 2300. All that we are going to see in 14th and 15th mantra. Hari
Om. Sanjay ji, I have one doubt. Now you have explained all those. I was content with the conclusion at the conclusion, but when you opened up the karma, now act plus klesha is karma. Now we cannot sit idle, or we cannot live without doing any karma.
Yes.
So there are people, even now, if I go and plant a tree, I get a pleasure, not a klesha, but I'm doing a karma only, no?
Yes, it is a karma.
But I'm not getting any klesha.
No. You are getting a pleasure. Pleasure itself is a klesha. Sukham is a klesha. Sukham itself is a klesha. Mind well. Even if you're trying to help somebody, right? When you try to help somebody, why should that help create any reaction in your mind? It may be see, what you did is you did a punya karya, but punyam also has a phalam. What will happen? Because you planted a tree, you will be born again. This time you will be born in a place which will give you lots of trees around your bungalow. Fine. But sir, what has happened is even that pleasure resulted in your birth again. That is why in 14th and 15th mantra, we will explain in detail why such an act of planting a tree or sukham itself can be dangerous. We will see that. It sounds very wrong for us. I'm helping the society. I'm trying to do everything for the society. Yes, you are supposed to do not only for society, you are supposed to, in fact, do everything for others only, nothing for yourself. But while doing that, the very favorable reaction that you are getting in your mind is a vritti. That should not happen. It's a very difficult exercise. So first, as they say, do a sattva gunatmak activity. Maybe you are feeling better. Doesn't matter. At least, you are feeling better in planting the trees, not in killing people. So it's a relatively good thing. But from the yoga point of view, a yogi is extremely dissatisfied even with the happiness. In fact, the next mantra is is based on only on that. If you look at the next mantra that we have, what does that mantra says? It says, Allhad paritapa palaha punya punya hetutvat. Allhad means this happiness that you were talking. That is also papa punyatmak. Punyatmak means again birth. Our whole intention of Yoga Sutra is not to be born again. Now it is very difficult for us to understand such a nice things I'm doing, such a nice life I'm leading. Why live this life and go to a place which I don't know, where there is no sukham, there is no dukkham? How can that place be? How will that place be? Is it a good place? I don't know. I can't even imagine. Why should I strive for something which I can't imagine? That is because we have not tasted the nectar. Amrut is the word used for that state. Now, by whom? By those who realized it. So we have to Shraddha. We have to follow that. Otherwise, you go and you test it yourself. That is what we are trying to do. So planting a tree is a good act, but a good act also if done with klesha, because sukham is a klesha. That means you do it as what? Sthita prajna lakshana of entire Bhagavad Gita is on this. He doesn't move. Na muhyati. No allada. No dukkham. No sukham. Then you feel, oh, what is the difference between such a person and a stone? It is not so, sir. Having the Chaitanya in you and yet not exhibiting anything of this type is a different state than not having a Chaitanyam in a very primitive form like stone. These are two different things. He is Ashmakavata. He may be like a stone, but he's not a stone. Hari.
Sanjay ji, it's just a question. I'm not sure whether it is a discussion on chicken and egg theory, but like Christianity has this theory, right, of Adam and Eve, and that's where it starts. Or we have Sankhya Yoga, and then, but if we're going with this presumption that it is birth, it's a cycle, right? Birth, then act plus klesha is karmashaya, and karmashaya is responsible for birth.
Yes.
Right? So, but the first birth itself should have presumed some karmashaya, right? Should have presumed some vasana which had a smriti with. So, where does this, how does, this energy or whatever, from Purusha we come to Prakriti, and we came to, the entire chain, right? Where does it jump into birth?
This has been a question which has been handled head on by Shastra, and I will quote you two references. The question should come to everybody's mind. Good that it came to your mind. It did come to my mind also. The answers that I got, or which is written in the Shastra, is it is said that all this is happening because of avidya, which is anadi. Anadi means it has no origin, but it is not ananta. It is santa. Avidya, when it started, no one knows. Second reference I'm quoting from Swami Vivekananda. In Swami Vivekananda had said that Indian philosophers are bold enough to admit that they do not know when did the avidya started precisely, and why did it start, how can it start without something before that. So all that has been presumed so far is avidya is anadi. So show me a point when it started. When you ask this question, you are asking this question within time frame, and time or the kala is within Maya. Try to understand. Time and space are created entities. So for avidya to exist from this time would mean it is within the time. And the status that we are talking of Atmavit is beyond time. So an avidya had started at the same time when the Maya itself has started. Whenever the time got stuck, the time was stuck, that was the time avidya came. That means Maya, when did it came? Avidya, Maya, only the difference is between Jiva and on a Vaishvika level. So Vyashti is the only difference between Maya and Avidya. Both of them started when the creation started. So starting of creation, starting of Maya, starting of Avidya, all are, and starting of time, all are at one point. And when did it start? when the Lord decided to project his Shakti, when Shiva decided that Shakti should be exhibited and not to be kept in potential form, that was the time then Guna Prakshobhini Maya exploded with avidya, time, everything came. Now the question is, when time is transcended, because all that is exploded is Trigunatmaka. The one who transcends the three gunas also transcends the time, also transcends the avidya, also transcends the Maya. So everything ends. So confirmation given by Vivekananda is this can be ended. Avidya can be ended by Vidya. So that is the reason why it is called Avidya, because it can be ended by Vidya. However, within the time, if you try to search when did it start, you will not be successful, because when time started, avidya started. When did the time start? When the Maya started. When did the Maya start? When the Shakti was projected by Lord. When did that happen? Whenever the Lord does it. So does that mean that he projects everything, he can take it back? He does take it back. And just to give it a little Pauranika shape, it is called Brahma, the day of a Brahma and the night of a Brahma, etc., etc., the life of a Brahma, then Manvantara and all that. The cosmogony is a product of that only. But factually and fundamentally speaking, avidya or the first birth or everything started when time, Maya, avidya, creation all started at a point when Lord decided to project the Shakti. Coming into crude astrophysics form, the so-called Big Bang is the beginning of the creation of a particular complex called Earth. We still do not know whether this universe is the only universe or there are many universes. And if this universe, the beginning is Big Bang, then what about the other universes? That is why now the concept that is taking currency in astrophysics is multiverses, not universe. So you never know how he is Sarva Shakti Samaveshaka. It is beyond the capacity of the intellect. The best of the intellect, like Vivekananda said, it is difficult to decipher. Best of the intellect, like Gautam Buddha said, let us not think about it, because by thinking that nothing great is to be achieved. But rather than working on destroying avidya, a lot can be achieved. Another beautiful answer given by Gautam Buddha for this question is, this question cannot be solved when you are at a mortal level. And when you go to immortal level, the question doesn't remain because you are beyond time. Those who are beyond time do not ask questions within time. Hari.
Thank you, Ji. One other allied thing is when you break this chain of so-called birth, right? So there are many. You listen to a physics lecture, and then it's everything is vibration. You're in particle form. You are aligned to the vibrations of the world. Then you have the other Puranic kind of thing of lokas, and there are different. But what is the state in which we exist when we transcend this?
Chaitanya. You become consciousness. You are the consciousness. You become the consciousness. You don't become. You are the consciousness. And a consciousness cannot be aware that he is consciousness. Otherwise, it will not be consciousness. Consciousness, swa asamvedya. Jai Om Namo Ji Adya Jaya Jaya Swasamvedya. That is how the Jnaneshwar Maharaj starts. Om Namo Ji Adya. The first, the original, who is the consciousness, even not aware of his consciousness, because when you are one, how can you be aware of other? You become consciousness. Where is Gurudev now? He's residing in me, in you. In what form? Chaitanya. How can he reside in me? Because he is Chaitanya. Where is he? Everywhere. What is he doing? Everything. Is he aware of him? No. Why? Because he is awareness. Hari Om.
Just one question, which is actually way below the level of the, in terms of just ordinary, we talk about these pots, right? And then there are subsequent collections of births, depending on the pot. And then when this is projected to a collective community, right? then that community will also, I guess, will be an aggregation of these spots, which then result, right? Now,
Yes.
I know time is immemorial, but if you look at the culture, from the Indian subcontinent, which gave birth to all these philosophies, different philosophies, etc., and if the people actually practiced it, how does it also explain? See, last time I was thinking about what you said, that, maybe if there's a individual like an Ekalavya or a Jesus Christ who had to go through one act to gain that, how does it explain, let's say thousands of years of rule? Let's say this land of India has gone through so much suppression and millions of lives have, how does, it doesn't correlate in the sense that the land that also gives you all the knowledge and so many different birth of religions has to suffer for 1,000 years. It's more than that. It's just continuing, right? So how does this explain this? I understand. I'm not contesting but the normal mortal mind is grappling with this, thousands of years explanation. There has to be some break, some change, or some. The originator cannot be the sufferer. That's what I'm trying to come to terms with.
Yes, what we are trying to ask is, how is it that certain communities keep on sinking? The reason is that what is happening to an individual does happen to the entire world. Vashti to samashti, pindite brahmandi. What happens is, many a times, depending upon the karma vipaka, the fructification of the karmas, the similar type of fructificating people form a community, because there has to be a conducive atmosphere for the fructification of the karmas. Now, for example, if there is a strong desire of a tamoguni to commit the murder of somebody, then there has to be a person who should irk this, or who should irritate this person to the level of committing a murder. So that means the relationship between the karmas that are happening, the oppressor and the suppressor, both oppressor and the sufferer, they have to come at one point so that they are able to exhaust their karmashayas. Now, when this is happening, many a times some technical changes happen. I will give you an example. The Babur, Taimurlen, and Changiz Khan, three of the largest empire makers, were born in the land. Today, that land is absolutely dilapidated because they are not even militarily powerful anywhere in the world. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, this area, which was called as Central Asia once upon a time, was the most powerful thing. Now, how did this happen? That time, the karma phala virechana of that place was towards expansion and prosperity. So Central Asia remained a prosperous position. Now, technically what happened? The maritime, the sea routes developed, and these countries are landlocked. So with the shift of sea route from the land route, this land went into ruins. So this becomes a tatkalika karana. But the main reason why it happened is the karmas of that particular community, that particular locality was getting over. It was replaced by another one. As far as deterioration of karmas is concerned, it sometimes goes to a very bad level. Anarchy happens. And when that happens, that is the time it can happen with individual. You yourself can stoop so low in karmas, but a community can also stoop low. A nation can stoop low. At that point of time, then just for the sake of keeping the order intact, Lord himself has to reincarnate. And reincarnation of the Lord in this form is called avatar. He is not here to exhaust his karmas. Because he doesn't have any karma, Lord borrows the karma from Maya and gets birth. That is how Vasudeva came. And he came, whenever he came, he is even today inspiring us in the form of Lord Krishna, because he remains the benchmark, a loka sangraha, benchmark for us to follow. So whenever the benchmarks are broken, new benchmarks will be formed. A very huge, large benchmark like Ram or Krishna will be formed, or a equally enlightening benchmark like Gurudeva will be formed. It will affect few millions. Some benchmark will affect few billions. Jesus Christ is affecting billions since 2000 years. There'll be another Jesus Christ maybe coming up. We do not know, because it's a very complex affair. Karmana gahano gati. Complicated and mysterious are thy ways. This is what Bhagavad Gita says. So yes, depending upon each place. That is why a place which is inhabited by only sand and absolute scarcity of water is the most prosperous place today where we are staying. And that is because our karma ashaya was to be exhausted here, we are here. That doesn't mean that after some time, those who will be here shall be in the most prosperous condition, because it depends upon the bhogas. My bhoga and the bhoga of people in Dubai is not in terms of prosperity. If we see, it is not the prosperity that we look at. Those are implements and instruments. Happiness in the form of bhoga, sukham and dukkham. America, every fourth person is suffering from depression. Is the bhogam there very high? It is a prosperous country. While if you go to a smaller country, like any South Asian or African poor country, maybe in smaller villages, they're more happy. So that is why in Bhutan, they say happiness index or whatever, they have quality of happiness. The whole idea is sukham and dukkham is what decides the bhoga part of it, not the prosperity in terms of material acquisitions. Hari Om.